And hello, Jet fans. The New York Jets fall to the Buffalo Bills, falling on the season, getting their seventh loss. The Jets now 2-7 as they lose to Buffalo 45-17. Mike White, the kitchen was wide open. We wanted to see Mike White cook. And unfortunately for Jet fans, once again, they feel burned after this game. So much to get into, guys. Thank you for joining me tonight. Would love to hear from you guys in the chat. Always throw what your questions are, your comments about this game. We'd love to answer the questions. Also, trying it a bit differently tonight, doing Sunday after the game. If you guys prefer me to do these reactions on Monday morning, just let me know. Whatever you guys think would be easier. So much to get into in this game, but Mike White, the state of this roster, the state of this defense. What do the Jets do over the final 8 games of the season? And I'll start first with Mike White, which is uh, I'm going to try to be as positive I can be in this episode. But to me, the big thing about this season and the biggest things you're looking for is people that can become pieces of a long-term plan here for the New York Jets. And despite today, I still believe that Mike White is a part of this plan. And I do feel the Jets have found themselves a good backup quarterback who understands the system, has shown he can thrive in the system, and more importantly, is a young quarterback who's got a long career ahead of him. And look, the Jets in the NFL now, you need a good backup because of the 17 game schedule. We've seen guys get nicked up. We've seen guys have to miss starts. And Mike White has proven to me, and I understand today was bad, but he has proven to me that in short spurts, he can be good enough, serviceable enough to be a good backup. And look, I haven't been saying this, I even said this in the preview, is Zach Wilson is clearly a more talented quarterback prospect than Mike White, but Mike White did understand this offense a little bit better, and you saw some success. And now you've seen what happens when he goes against a really good defense and when people have some film on him. He struggled today. I do think he forced a couple of those throws, those interceptions in the second half, was trying to make plays, trying to play a little hero ball, which really isn't in his repertoire. But it's frustrating as a Jet fan because you were hoping to see greatness from Mike White. But this is unfortunately what was likely going to happen, which is look, Mike White is better than we thought, but what he is he's a good serviceable backup. I mean, I kept hearing this all this week. Like, what if he's the next Tom Brady? What if he's the next franchise quarterback? And look, those guys, that is truly hitting the lottery. And there's a reason, like Mike White went in the fifth round. I like a lot of the things about Mike White, but like I said, when I talked about him as a player coming out, when I looked at him in the draft, to me, he was a guy. He's a lot of BB pluses. He doesn't do anything really bad, but there isn't really anything that sticks out to you. And I thought he did a good job filling in. And like I said, this season is about finding pieces moving forward. And for the Jets, I think they have unexpectedly found a good, serviceable long term backup for Zach Wilson. And now, once again, if Zach Wilson is 100% ready to go, I think the Dolphins are a good matchup for him. It'll be interesting because we saw them against the Ravens just decide, hey, we're going to zero blitz all the time. And they just got after Lamar Jackson. But I do think the Dolphins, and the nice thing for the Jets, this second half, the schedule does get a bit easier. I do think that will help with Zach. But I do think Zach could have learned through this sitting process, hey, I don't have to make the big play. I just can sit back. I can read the defense. I can get it to these playmakers in short space and let them make plays and utilize the running game. So I do think that you hope Zach Wilson takes a good learning experience from this. But once again, this was ugly. And I know Robert Saleh says he won't take defensive responsibilities, but I think we're at that point where he needs to. And one thing I keep seeing on Twitter, and I kept seeing Jet fans saying, is like, well, how's this defense going to get better? When's this defense going to get better? And unfortunately, it's not going to get better. I think what you might see over these last 8 games is the Jets now will start to play kind of like what they did the first 4 weeks of the season. Okay, quarterbacks, but quarterbacks that probably aren't going to kill you. They get Tua Tagovailoa twice. He's a quarterback that's not going to kill you. David Mills. I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the schedule. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is obviously more talented than those guys, but still a rookie quarterback. But you look at this next half of the season, even the Saints are playing with their backup quarterback. They don't have Jameis Winston. Outside of Tom Brady, a lot of these quarterbacks are guys who are at best middle of the road quarterbacks in the NFL. And I do think that that helps, especially when you're talking about the Jets defense and the state that they're in. But for people saying, well, the Jets defense got to get better. Well, unfortunately, Jet fans, it's not going to get better because, and I'll get more on Joe Douglas in a bit, but he approached this last offseason the right way, which is he had to improve this dreadful offense. And we've seen flashes, but once again, you saw a major investment both in free agency and in the draft to this offense. Now, the defense coming into the season, there were really three big key cogs on this defense that really needed to play well and that were going to lead each respective unit. That was Carl Lawson on the D line. That was CJ Mosley at middle linebacker. And that was Marcus May on the back end of the defense. And realistically, of the Jets starters, Quinnen Williams, Carl Lawson, and I'll throw John Franklin Myers in there, are guys that could start for most teams. The back seven, though, I would say the only ones I really would consider to be starting caliber players for good teams would be Marcus May and CJ Mosley. And unfortunately for the Jets, a defense that was going to have issues this year because the Jets are playing the most rookies in the NFL. They have the most rookie snaps in the NFL. They have corners that are primarily rookies. They unfortunately were going to have a lot of growing pains, and they really needed to rely on a couple of these key veterans. And unfortunately for the Jets, they've lost Marcus May for the year, and he wasn't out there for a couple games with injuries. And then you had obviously the biggest blow was Carl Lawson in training camp with the Achilles tear. So when you lost those key pieces, it was going to be an uphill battle. Like this defense, this was going to be a weather the storm type of year because this is a situation where this wasn't a great free agency class on defense. And if you were going to overpay, you're going to be paying for maybe some B players, and for the amount of money you were going to be paying, it wasn't worth it. And even draft wise, this was a better offensive draft than a defensive draft, and I thought the Jets handled that well. But this is going to be a rough 8 weeks, and I know it's been frustrating because this team's giving up over 30 points on defense a game, and I get it. It's frustrating, and you have every right to be angry. And as a Jet fan, you get absolutely like a migraine watching this defense sometimes when they can't defend a screen pass. And it's frustrating because even today, when this defense finally was forcing a couple turnovers and was getting some decent pressure on Josh Allen at times, you saw in the second half, this defense, they just could not stick with it. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Buffalo, I said this in the preview, I felt that they were going to come out pissed off about that Jacksonville game, and they did. And let's be honest, like if Buffalo is right, they are probably one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the AFC this entire season, and this is one of those teams that they feel their Super Bowl window is now. They're on a different plane than the New York Jets right now. And this was always a game, like even when I was going through the early schedule, I'm like, this is going to be a brutal game for the Jets, is when they have to play Buffalo. And you saw it. There's a huge talent disparity, both offensively and defensively. And realistically, I mean, you have to say these things out loud to really make it make sense. The New York Jets were going against the Buffalo Bills, who are one of the top 3 or 4 most talented rosters in the entire league. And they were going with a backup quarterback making his 3rd career start, and really he'd only played 5 quarters as a starting quarterback going against the number 1 defense in the league. It went about what you would expect if when you really listen to that and when you really look into that. So for me, I think that the Jets, it was just going to be a tough game. It turned out to be that way. Would you have liked to see Mike White do better? But I think he showed what he is. And once again, guys, you can put in the chat if you have any questions, any comments. We'd love to hear from you guys what you think about this game. I think one of the big people that got a lot of grief this game, and I'll get to the coaching staff in a bit, was Joe Douglas, because I kept seeing tweets basically saying, from members of the media saying, "Oh, Joe Douglas has had way too long of a leash. This roster's terrible under him. He's basically 4-21 over the last 2 years." I get all that, and I get where people are coming from. And once again, I'm one of the people that preaches patience, and I understand that people, when I say that, are saying, "Well, how much longer do we have to wait?" I completely understand. But Joe Douglas, to me, his timeline isn't really fair because he was brought in after the draft. So basically, that first season, he really didn't have much of an input on the roster. That second year, he was drafting for Adam Gase and trying to fit what Adam Gase was looking for in players. And then he gets a brand new head coach, and now he's drafting for a whole new scheme. So realistically, I get that Joe Douglas has had two drafts, but this organization where Joe Douglas, the head coach, the quarterback that Joe Douglas wanted, that are on the same plane were in the last year. And to be fair, the draft that he had this last year is looking a lot better. Michael Carter looks like a very good running back. Some of these young corners look like they at least will be capable pieces moving forward. I mean, Elijah Vera Tucker looks great. Elijah Moore's really come on. And look, I do think that Zach Wilson has a lot of talent. The big question is, can he learn from sitting on the bench, and will we see him explode? But for people killing Joe Douglas, I mean, people need to remember how badly this team has drafted for a decade. And that is why this roster is like why it is. And for Joe Douglas to only have two drafts, like this is going to be a painful rebuild because the Jets have so many holes. They have so many things to address. And oh, by the way, they are still paying some albatross contracts in Maccagnan. Just think about that. The Tremaine Johnson, they're still paying for him until the end of the season. That was under Maccagnan, and Maccagnan hasn't had a draft in over 2 years. Just think about some of those bad contracts. Even the worst contract Jets right now is probably this Mosley contract. That was a Mike Maccagnan contract. So, and when we talk about bad drafts, I mean, we've all seen the statistics from the draft. I mean, how many first round picks have gotten a second contract with the Jets? Not even the last decade, the last 15 years. They just have not drafted well. And I do think that Joe Douglas is a good drafter. Has he hit a home run in the draft? I still think this year we'll have to see how Elijah Moore and these guys continue to develop and how Zach Wilson plays. But I do see a lot of good things that Joe Douglas has done. And I get people are saying, well, why is this roster so bad? Why is this roster so terrible? Well, part of the reason the Jets have to build through the draft is really good players. There's two types of players in free agency. It's the guys that are getting their first contract and want to get a ton of money, or guys that are a little bit older but want to usually win and don't mind taking a little bit of a pay cut to do that. The Jets are in a position where they're not getting any of the latter. So for the Jets in free agency to get people to come play for a team that's been this bad, you're going to have to vastly overpay. Now, if it's a great player, I don't think the Jets have a problem with doing that. But a lot of the last two off seasons, it's been a lot of good B players, maybe B plus free agents that want A plus player money. And I don't think Joe Douglas wants to do that. And we've seen it with Jamal Adams. We see it with Marcus May. He has a number set. And once he's set on that number, he's not going to change. But I mean, once again, though, frustrating game. Mike White, 4 interceptions. Jets with 5 turnovers. Jets with the worst turnover ratio in the NFL at minus 15 this year. Look, it's rough, and I get that it doesn't help when Robert Saleh saying in the press conference that basically they have to fix it, and you're like, well, they've had weeks to fix it, and they still have not been able to fix it. They still have not been able to make the adjustments on defense. But once again, I mean, this defense and this defensive staff, they're shorthanded as it is. They already are dealing with a deck that isn't full. I mean, we're talking about them losing arguably 2 of their most valuable pieces for the majority of the season. And on top of that, this is a team that they don't have a lot of great depth. They haven't had time to build up this defense. A lot of the last 2 drafts have been built to try to help the young quarterbacks that the Jets are trying to grow. And when you do that and you put that emphasis on the offense, your defense is going to take some hits. I mean, the biggest defensive pick probably was Ashton Davis, and he has struggled, and I get that. But you look right now, the Jets, unfortunately for this defense, how's it going to get better? I think the big thing is how's the other competition? Like I was saying, I do think that the Jets get a bit of a break because the quarterbacks that they're playing the second half of the season, most of them aren't as dynamic. They're younger quarterbacks. I think they hold on to the ball a little bit longer, and that helps this Jets pass rush. But again, they're not going to get help. They're not going to find guys in free agency at this point. You're not getting reinforcements, unfortunately. We're past the trade deadline, and even at the trade deadline, the Jets were not going to trade valuable draft capital to get pieces to fill out this defense. Now, they found Quincy Williams on the waiver wire. That's been a solid pickup. But at this point in the season, I don't really see anyone major on the waiver wire coming through that the Jets could go out and get to improve this team. And unfortunately, with what you see is what you get at this point. And I mean, look, I think this defense could be put in a better position with the coaching. But again, you also need some talent that the coaching can utilize and talent that the coaching can deploy out there. And unfortunately for the Jets right now, they're devoid on talent on the defensive side, especially. And this was a rough game to watch, but this is going to be, unfortunately, like I've said time and time again, this is going to be a learning experience for a lot of these young guys on this team. Once again, the Jets lead all rookies in snaps this year. A lot of that, especially on the defensive side. So it's going to be rough. I mean, I think that there's maybe 4 winnable games in the second half. Jaguars and potentially the Dolphins twice and the Texans. The only other game I could maybe see the Jets sneaking is week 18, but that's dependent on where Buffalo is. If Buffalo has clinched a playoff spot at that point and are happy with where they are, I think they'll sell a lot of their starters in that game. Because keep in mind, now there's only one bye if you're the top seed. So if that's all figured out and the Bills know where they're playing or have a really good idea of where they're playing and the game's not going to alter their position too much, I think you'll see the backups and the Jets might have an opportunity then. But I mean, this is just, once again, I get like people are frustrated. Like I've seen it on Twitter, and if you guys want to put anything in the chat, would love to hear what you guys have to say. Once again, bring your questions. Are you frustrated with the coaching? Are you frustrated with the front office? I mean, if you have every right to be frustrated with how this team and how this organization has performed, but I do think that once again, that this is basically, if you were honest, what you expected this year. There is going to be a lot of blowout games when you have an especially young team and an inexperienced team. I mean, I really do believe one of the crippling moments in this game was the Corey Davis fumble, and I'll get to him in a little bit, but that to me was the turning point. And when you have a very young team like the Jets are right now, a lot of it's motion. When emotion's going in the right direction, it's contagious, and the Jets can build off of that, and that's great. But when you also have a young team, when things go bad, it can tend to snowball. And I think that's what happened because this game was close at the half. And the Jets had a chance to make it even closer, at least get a field goal going into the half. I mean, Corey Davis makes a catch, is backpedaling basically into field goal range, and then fumbles the ball. And to me, that just killed the momentum because then the Jets gave up 21 unanswered points in the third quarter, and that's all she wrote. So, and I mean, that's been a frustrating thing too, which is one thing I don't get about this Jet offense is the love affair with Corey Davis. I get they've paid him a lot of money, and I get they paid him the number one receiver. He's a good receiver, but he has not been the number one receiver this year. 5 drops this year, the big fumble today. And I do think what we saw with Mike White, one of the reasons this offense was successful over the last 2 weeks, and now we actually have to bring up it as a good point because now you've seen it. I mean, we talked about the last 2 weeks. Well, this offense looks so much better with Mike White and Josh Johnson running the offense. But another factor I think we have to talk about that really wasn't addressed was the absence of Corey Davis those 2 weeks. I think the Jets realize he's a talented player, but to me, they scheme too much of the offense to get the ball in his hands. And right now, the hottest playmakers on this offense are Elijah Moore and Mike. I mean, they plays, they're playing hard. Elijah Moore with another touchdown today, albeit in garbage time, but still, I mean, Elijah Moore has really come on over these last couple of weeks, really starting to get comfortable. And, like Corey Davis, could it be the pressures of playing under the big contract? I think that's part of it. And we see it a lot when you have good receivers in free agency. When they get the big contract, they want to prove that they are the number one receiver. And look, Corey Davis on a good team is an excellent number two. He is a high end two, maybe even at times a low end one. But when we think about a number one receiver on a team, you saw it today. Stephon Diggs is a true number one. You have to scheme your coverage to him. And the time the Jets left him one-on-one, which I will never understand, he burned them. And even on the touchdown plays, the 2 touchdown catches, the first one that was overturned and the second one, Echols was getting burned. But I will say this, like, that was tight coverage. It wasn't like a blown coverage or Diggs had like 3 or 4 steps on him. That was tight coverage, and Diggs made a great play and a great effort to catch the football. That's what a true one receiver does. He completely changes the offense. And if you forget about him or you don't scheme him on every play, he can take advantage. And you saw it today. Corey Davis is a good receiver. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think teams are truly scheming him out. And the one team that did was the Patriots. But the reason they did that was because Zach Wilson, that was his favorite target. And Zach Wilson was locking in on Corey Davis and trying to force feed him the football. And the Patriots said, all right, you want to do that, kid? Go ahead and try. We're going to double team him. We're going to put coverage over the top. We're going to make it almost impossible for you to get the ball to him. And that's what they did in week 2. They made it incredibly difficult. And, this is just another situation today where you saw it with this offense where I'm trying to force a couple plays to Corey Davis and didn't work. And of course, the big killer fumble, like you look like the momentum changed in that game where you felt like, okay, the Jets can at least build a little momentum and maybe have something in the second half and be competitive. But I think when that happened, you saw the life drain out of that sideline and they were not able to recover it. And then you saw Mike White with them down even more, trying to do hero ball, play outside of himself, force the football down the field, which led to some big interceptions. And that's the thing with the young teams. And even though Mike White has been in the league, the scary thing is he's probably one of the older veterans on this team, and he's been a backup for 3 years. And even he was in the situation where his mindset was, oh my God, we're down. I have to make a play. I have to force the football down the field. If I don't, we're not going to win. And to me, that's not what Mike White can do. Mike White doesn't have the arm to go down the field like that. Mike White doesn't have the talent to push the ball and make those throws down the field. He has to play within a system. And when he plays within a system, he's very efficient. He's very effective. But when you ask him to play outside, it's very difficult. Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Please comment if you have any questions or comments about this game. Also, would love your feedback. Do you prefer me doing these reactions on Sunday, or would you prefer me to do them on Monday during the morning? I'd love to hear from you guys. See what you're feeling, Jets Nation, after this another tough loss. And once again, you keep hearing that the defense is going to get fixed. I do think that they can adjust the scheme a little bit. But overall, I mean, really the Jets moving forward, I mean, they have some pieces on the D-line, but I do think that the back seven, that's going to be the major overhaul. And I did a mock draft video last week. You can find that on the channel where I gave you my first 3-round mock draft. And a lot of it did focus on the defense. But I also made a mention, too, because I was getting a lot of comments saying, well, why didn't you have the Jets taking a corner or a safety specifically in the first 3 rounds? And to me, I said the biggest thing for me is I go off of the tendencies, but I do think Joe Douglas is going to open the checkbook and spend a lot of money because he gets a lot of dead cap off the cap too. And I do think he's going to feel pressure from the ownership group to start winning some more football games next year. And this is a good free agency class for corners. I do think the Jets, that's where they're going to really address the corner position because I do think that they feel that in the last 2 drafts, like with a Bryce Hall, with a Michael Carter, they feel they got some good young players, some good young depth pieces, some good 2, 3, number 4 corners, but they really need a great number 1 or 2, and I think that they feel that they can go out and address that better in free agency and getting someone that's a proven veteran than taking a gamble on someone early in the draft. When you look at the draft, there's going to be certain positions where the Jets can improve easier in the draft early, especially than in free agency. One of those being the offensive line. That's one of them be the defensive line pass rusher. I mean, you can find linebackers, corners, and safeties in free agency or later in the draft. You can't find great offensive linemen. And even if you could in free agency, the Jets would probably have to either overpay for a decent player or basically have to just bite the bullet and overpay for a guy, or realize that they're not going to be able to compete with some of these guys because they want to go to good teams that can compete, and that they're the final piece to a championship puzzle or a team that's going to go to the playoffs. And really, the Jets right now, they're not close to that. I mean, this next 8 games, it's all going to be about progress. It's going to be about how this team can grow. It's going to be, can Zach Wilson learn from these games on the sideline and take that knowledge and be able to utilize it effectively? But I do think that for this Jet team, it's all going to be about progress. And right now, it's looking tough. But I do believe that, once again, Joe Douglas, this is really, once again, I know he's had 2 drafts, but to me, he's only really had 1, because he's only had 1 building with this coach, because the scheme's completely changed. How they value players in the system has completely changed. And you look at the players he's drafted for Robert Saleh, they look pretty good. And they have a bunch of draft picks. And really, I think that they're building through the draft is smart. But I do think you're going to see a lot of supplementing this roster through free agency. Once again, guys, would love to hear from you in the chat. Chat is open, of course, the live chat. Would love to hear what you have to say. Would love your comments. Would love to see what you're thinking, what you're feeling, your opinions of how, if do you have opinions on Joe Douglas, Mike White, Robert Saleh, this defense. Would love to hear from you guys. Would love to answer your questions. Love talking to you guys. Would love to hear what you have to say. Once again, the chat is open, and would love to hear what you guys what your thoughts are after this game. And I know it was a tough one. And I bet a lot of people didn't even finish the game. I mean, that's how bad it was in the second half. It was brutal. And for some reason, my broadcast was in Spanish today. I don't know if anyone else had that problem, but for some reason, watching the Jet game in Spanish was even more frustrating. Although I guess the good news is I didn't have to hear Jay Feely on the announce. So, I mean, maybe it was a blessing in disguise. Who knows? But once again, it looks like Robert Saleh wouldn't officially announce after the game, but I believe Zach Wilson is going to be 100% good to go against the Dolphins. And really, I think that that's kind of what the Jets were hoping for. And now Wilson gets the last 8 games of the season. Schedules lightens up for this Jet team. I mean, even if this team can go 3-5 down the stretch and be competitive, I mean, I still think that's going to be huge for this team. Is you just want to see them compete in games. And look, I think that they can do that in the Miami game, the Texans game, obviously the Jacksonville game. Can they do it against the Saints? Can they do it against the Buccaneers? Can they do it against the Bills again? So I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for this team down the stretch. But again, it was a frustrating losing 45, another game where this defense gives up over 500 game, where you see the offense turn the football over 5 times. I mean, it's just bad on both sides of the ball. And it's tough because you see the flashes in there. You see some good drives. You see some growth in there. But once again, it gets muddled because this team gets beaten terribly. They get beaten by a division rival. This team's now 0-3 in their division, and 3 division games to go. 2 against the Dolphins, of course, next weekend. And then they finish up with the Bills again at the end of the season. So, and that game in Buffalo as well. So that should definitely be an interesting one and a tough one. But, once again, guys, we'll have more videos this week. We previewing the Jets-Dolphins game. Would love to hear your thoughts. But, basically to sum up, I don't think it's fair to kill Joe Douglas. I still think it's early. technically in this process because I only consider it really being 1 year so far. I do think you're going to see Zach Wilson start against the Dolphins. And even with Mike White, I know it was a rough game, but I do think he showed you enough that he can be a good backup for this team. And really, this season's about finding pieces for the puzzle moving forward. And I do think that Mike White has done enough to prove and like he can work in this system to the point where if he has to spot start a game or two, he can do it, and the Jets can move the football effectively. And this was also against the best defense, arguably in the NFL right now. So, I mean, he's still a young quarterback. Basically, this was his third career start. It was like throwing someone to the wolves, but I still think he's at least proven that he can be a valuable piece moving forward, even in a limited capacity. And once again, unfortunately for this team, I think that this defense, people keep asking, like, how is it going to get better? When's it going to get better? And unfortunately, guys, I think the answer is this year it's not. It's because they don't have talent on this team. They've lost too many key pieces to an already thin defense. I do think the thing that will help is they're playing lesser quarterbacks the rest of the schedule. I do think you get some more favorable quarterback matchups against this defense and offensive lines against this defense. You hope Miami's a good matchup for this defensive line. But once again, I mean, the way this defense has played the last 4 weeks, they need to. I know some of it is the scheme and some of it is understanding the assignments. But again, it's a bad combination for this defense where you have a lack of talent, but you also have a lack of experience. Where I do think that this defense could technically get by with this talent. But the problem is when you're playing so many rookies in the secondary, when you're playing so many first and second year guys on the defensive line, at linebacker, at corner, at safety, a lot of it's just they don't know where they're supposed to be. They don't understand their assignments. They don't understand that they can get themselves easily out of position. I mean, you could have someone that might even be a worse player, but they're a veteran player that knows where their assignment is, knows where they're supposed to be in the defense, that they could be more effective. And unfortunately for this team, it's just a bad combination of being young and being a team that is devoid of talent. I mean, you can get away with being one or the other, but unfortunately, with where the Jets are now, they just cannot get by with it because they just don't have the experience or the talent on that defense. And it's going to be a rough couple of weeks, but I do think that this offseason, the priority is going to be still to help the quarterback and still to help this offense. But you're going to see a heavy emphasis on the defense. I mean, if I had to guess, I would say 3 of the first 5 picks the Jets have in the first 3 rounds likely go defense. And also, this is a very good defensive free agency class. I will not be shocked if Joe Douglas opens the checkbook and goes and be aggressive in the offseason, especially with the pressure of not winning games and where the current state of the franchise is in. But once again, guys, you want more New York Jets content, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our latest videos. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Once again, the Jets fall 45-17 to the Buffalo Bills. We'll be back later this week to preview Jets and Dolphins later on. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, this is Rich Sports Talk.